Joseph DeAngelo, also known as the Golden State Killer, committed a series of crimes in both Northern and Southern California from 1973 to 1986. Like many criminals, he began with smaller offenses. Initially, he'd break into empty homes, go through people's stuff, and steal things. Basically, typical burglary stuff. But as time passed, he got bolder, and his methods became more sinister. He moved beyond mere burglaries and began targeting houses where women were alone, committing sexual assaults. Then, he took it a step further by breaking into homes where husbands or partners were present. He'd incapacitate the men and then carry out sexual assaults. Eventually, this escalated to serial murder. In the book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was mentioned in the previous video, the author interviewed police officers who worked on the case at the time. These were experienced cops, used to handling gruesome crimes like decapitated bodies. But when it came to the Golden State Killer, they found it unlike anything they had ever seen before. So, in this video, let's focus on the early phase of his criminal activities, starting with those burglaries. Between 1973 and 1976, about 150 burglary cases occurred in Visalia, a small town in Central California. This burglar was quite different from the typical ones. It seemed like he enjoyed not just stealing but rummaging through other people's belongings. Oddly, he didn't seem interested in stealing valuable items. Instead, he took personal stuff. For instance, he'd steal a single earring from a pair or go through photo albums and take a few pictures. It was also clear that his crimes had a sexual motive, because at times, he'd lay out women's underwear from the closet to the bathroom, among other strange acts. Apart from burglary, this criminal also engaged in peeping into people's homes, and this would have been an incredibly traumatic experience for the victims. Imagine thinking someone is watching you from outside your window in the middle of the night. Especially for women, this fear would be something they'd remember for a lifetime. Listening to interviews with the victims from that time, it's evident that even though they weren't physically harmed, they suffered significant psychological distress. One victim's story is particularly eerie.
One day, my dad suddenly rushed into the house, gasping for breath. He said he saw someone outside looking at me and chased them away, but the intruder got away. After this incident, about 6 months later, I was at home watching TV with my boyfriend. I jokingly mentioned that a strange man had been staring at me from outside a few months ago. He laughed and said, "You mean like he's still out there right now?" I also laughed and got up to change the TV channel and saw a man looking at me through the window. I was so shocked that I screamed, and my boyfriend and dad rushed outside, but the intruder escaped again.
Following that, the criminal returned to the woman's house once more. While the victim was asleep, the intruder, armed with a gun, appeared out of nowhere and compelled the victim to go outside. The victim's father awoke upon hearing the commotion and confronted the intruder in the hallway. A physical altercation broke out, and as the intruder made his escape, he fired 3 shots from behind. Tragically, one of those bullets struck the victim's father, leading to his death. This incident is recognized as the first murder committed by the Golden State Killer. And in 2018, after this murderer was apprehended, he admitted his guilt in the case, resulting in a guilty verdict. This murder took place in the fall of 1975, showcasing his progression from a burglar starting in 1973 to becoming a rapist and murderer. After this murder, the criminal committed around 30 to 40 more crimes in the area. Some of these crimes involved breaking into homes while people were present, which was a change from his previous pattern. Of course, the police didn't remain idle. Not long after the murder, a victim noticed suspicious footprints around her house and reported it to the police. The police had a hunch that the perpetrator might return to the scene and decided to conduct a stakeout. At the end of their surveillance, 2 officers spotted a suspicious person approaching the victim's house. They tried to apprehend him, but the criminal managed to escape, with police officers chasing him into a dead-end street. During the confrontation, the perpetrator suddenly fired a shot at the police officers and hit one of them. While the other officer was in shock, checking on his wounded colleague, the criminal escaped again. Thankfully, the bullet hit the officer's flashlight, so he wasn't seriously injured. Unfortunately, they lost the criminal again during this incident. And later, during the trial, the criminal admitted his involvement in this attempted murder, and he was convicted. This incident occurred in December 1975 and marked one of the closest moments to the Golden State Killer's arrest during his long spree of crimes. While we can't say for sure whether it was because he was almost caught by the police, the criminal significantly reduced his activity in this area. According to some other sources, there were 2 more burglary cases reported in 1976, but whether these were the work of the same offender or copycats remains unknown. When he gained notoriety as the Visalia ransacker in Visalia, a different criminal known as East Area Rapist appeared in the eastern region. As mentioned in the previous video, they were actually the same person, although this wasn't known at the time. In hindsight, it's clear that their methods of operation were very similar. For instance, he had a tendency to leave behind valuable items while favoring personal belongings such as photos or rings during his burglaries. Typically, he targeted homes on the ground level, making it simpler for him to escape. His break-ins occurred mainly during the late hours of the night. He used everyday items found in the victims' homes to set up makeshift alarm systems, like stacking plates near entry points to create noise if someone was coming in. Additionally, he meticulously observed and studied his victims, gaining insights into their routines and behaviors before committing his crimes. However, it was the 1970s, and even in the United States, forensic science hadn't advanced much. Cooperation between different regional police departments was also minimal. Some detectives who were handling the Visalia ransacker cases suspected that the same offender was involved in the East Area Rapist cases, but the higher-up couldn't accept that the suspect they couldn't catch in their area could be responsible for crimes in another area. As a result, cooperation between different police departments didn't happen, even when the Southern California murders occurred later under similar circumstances. It's worth noting that after the Golden State Killer was apprehended, it was revealed that Joseph DeAngelo had worked as a police officer in Exeter, near Visalia, from 1973 to 1976, and this picture shows him during his time as a police officer in the 1970s. Additionally, many experts believe that Joseph DeAngelo was also the perpetrator behind the so-called Cordova cat burglar incidents that happened between 1972 and 1973 in Rancho Cordova, east of Sacramento. About 50 burglary cases occurred at that time, and the modus operandi was very similar to the Visalia ransacker cases. Notably, Joseph DeAngelo lived relatively close to these areas and was attending a college not far from Rancho Cordova when the first burglaries happened in 1972. However, the crimes in Rancho Cordova stopped suddenly, and the crimes in Visalia began in 1973 when he started working as a police officer in the vicinity. In the next video, we will take a closer and more detailed look at the chilling crimes committed by this perpetrator. Please don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for watching.